Let's talk Chalk. More specifically, let's talk about this Nicktoon from the early 2000s, ChalkZone. With a theme like that, you can't help but be at least curious about what this show has to offer. ChalkZone revolved around the character of Rudy Tabooty, an artistic elementary school student who by chance discovers some magic chalk in the classroom. When used, this magic chalk grants him access to the titular world of ChalkZone, a world where everything drawn and erased on the chalkboard comes to life, literally. The show started as a short subject series on Nickelodeon's Oh Yeah Cartoons show, eventually becoming its own half-hour show on the network in 2002. The show follows Rudy's adventures with Snap, a superhero-like chalk drawing of his, and his astute best friend Penny, through this mythical land of erased chalk drawings. He comes across strange creatures, has to face dreadful foes, and above all else keep ChalkZone safe. That premise makes this sound like an exciting show, doesn't it? Well, it had an appealing concept alright, but concept alone doesn't make a show good. ChalkZone tried its best to be as zany and upbeat as possible, but the major problem with it is one of blandness. The characters were bland, the humor was bland. I mean, the town in which Rudy and Penny lived was called Plainsville, for heaven's sake. Every character on the show felt like they were as three-dimensional as the average drawing on a chalkboard. I mean, there was relatively little personality to the main characters beyond a few traits. Rudy was the artist, Snap was the witty wisecracker, and Penny was the smart girl. And those were the only notable traits about the main characters. The side characters were pretty bland as well. We had Penny and Rudy's cartoon-hating teacher Mr. Welter, and class bully Reggie Bullnerd as part of the school. And the way I just described them pretty much gave away their whole characters. The overall blandness of the show extended to the stories as well. While the stories weren't poorly written for the most part, there wasn't enough clever dialogue or witty banter to help bolster the entertainment factor. For the most part, the humor in ChalkZone was fairly contrived and nothing particularly stood out in terms of the jokes. For example, in the episode Hole in the Wall, we see Rudy and Penny trying to stop a rich tycoon from turning ChalkZone into a theme park. The jokes in the episode involve the antagonist barking like a dog whenever he gets enraged, getting put through a ChalkZone car wash before being flung out of the hole, and having to deal with his dim-witted brother as the construction worker. These jokes, while not totally cliché, don't exactly stand out as laugh-out-loud funny to me. The plot is pretty much just a typical preserve the sacred land story. As far as the Chalk World part of the show, things were a little better. I'll say this, ChalkZone does look like a fun place to visit. The landscapes and environments made for the location did make you want to see what kind of adventures the characters had there. Plots centered in ChalkZone had the advantage over those that involved the real world as more imagination was involved. Episodes like Chalk Queen or The Scrawl, both of which showcase Rudy having to face formidable foes in ChalkZone, showed promise where plot was concerned. A few distinctive characters, such as Biclops, Rapshiba, and Blocky, one of Rudy's first chalk drawings, also live in ChalkZone. These characters, while not much more three-dimensional in terms of personality than the ones that lived in the real world, were at least more robust. They gave ChalkZone sort of a zany charm, and the stories featuring them were a little bit more dynamic. At the end of the show, a musical segment would come on. The quality of these tunes varied. Some were catchy and pleasant, and others were... yeah. I don't know if some of these songs were written in only 5 minutes, but many times the ideas behind them don't really leave much to the imagination. But they take place at the end of the show and they aren't that lengthy, so they really don't detract from the overall show either way. If ChalkZone had more sophisticated humor and a better developed cast, it could have been one of the great Nicktoons. Looking at it, I can't help but draw comparisons to another animated fantasy show. It's a show that airs on Cartoon Network, it's one of the network's most popular cartoons, and it's got quite a following. It's quite adventuresome, actually. In fact, I think that might even be in the title somewhere. What's that show's name again? Oh yeah, Adventure Time with Finn and Jake. Even though Adventure Time doesn't see our main characters divide their time between the real world and the fantasy world like ChalkZone does, there are many similarities. It features a witty character who serves as the best friend to our protagonist, it has formidable and uncanny villains, and oh hey look, they both have a resident female genius.
Good news is, I still have all my notes for making the antidote formula. Perpetual motion has been a dream of scientists for centuries.
And they're both voiced by the same person. Wonder who else she's voiced.
This tangy yellow beverage is truly delightful.
Starfire?
That's mustard.
Is there more?
Ah. Anyway, Adventure Time manages to succeed in a better way than ChalkZone with its concept. The characters are better developed and don't really have such one-note personalities. Besides our main stars Finn and Jake, the side characters also get time to shine in their own right. Characters like Peppermint Butler or Tree Trunks have episodes that explore their personalities and backstories in more depth. In addition, the humor in Adventure Time was much more sophisticated and much less contrived than in ChalkZone. I'm sure many fans of the show were laughing out loud at scenes like this.
Tootin' baby, I can punch your buns. Punch your buns, I can punch all your buns.
Of course, Adventure Time also had more serious moments and more moving scenes as well, which ChalkZone never attempted to do much of. I know it sounds unfair to compare two shows whose debut dates are separated by nearly a decade, and Adventure Time is geared toward an older audience than ChalkZone was, but putting things in perspective, and given all of what Adventure Time has done, there's no reason ChalkZone couldn't have been something similar on a smaller scale. I guess you could also argue that ChalkZone was aimed at the younger end of the 6 to 11 demographic. Well, so is Arthur, and that show also manages to have more sophisticated humor and a better developed cast. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I feel like ChalkZone could have been so much more than what it was. To those of you who are fans, I'm not saying I hate the show. In fact, compared to the dreadful garbage Nickelodeon has been putting out lately, ChalkZone seems positively golden by comparison. There was potential to be something great here, it's just that ChalkZone didn't utilize it. While it's a relatively harmless show, it didn't do enough to stand out amongst the other Nicktoons airing at the time. Shows like SpongeBob and Jimmy Neutron were shows that had more depth to their characters and had better executed humor. They also appealed to those that were outside of their young demographics. Movies and TV specials from these two shows helped grant them both larger viewing audiences as well. While ChalkZone did have one TV special, 2004's The Big Blow Up, it was a move that proved to be too little too late. By this time, ChalkZone was already not pulling in the ratings compared to the other Nicktoons, and its time slot kept being changed around, which didn't allow for new episodes to get the much-needed viewership. At least, that's what I think the reasons were behind the show's cancellation in 2005. Though new episodes trickled out afterwards through at least 2008, the show had run its course. Now, I know Nickelodeon has made a great deal of unwise decisions in the past and in recent years, but I can't say that I blame them for axing this show when they did. Over the run of a series, you expect the show to grow and develop more, and with ChalkZone, that's not really what happened. Reviewing episodes from all 4 seasons, I never really saw it do anything spectacularly different or astounding over its run. It's sadly a forgettable show. I say sadly because with such a great concept, forgettable is the last thing you want to be saying about a show like this. Had the characters been given more depth and the humor been less contrived, it'd be a far better show in my mind. As it stands, it's just mediocre. It's nothing terrible, but nothing great. If you're curious about it, you're welcome to check it out by all means. It's just you kind of can't go into it expecting too much. It's frustrating when you see something with a good idea behind it, but nothing is really done to make the most out of it. I'd like to see something like this done again by someone else, but with a little more imagination and flair. There's a great market for fantasy-type shows like this, but it takes a special kind of talent to make them work and impact the audience. If only a show of such fantastical adventures still existed today. Oh yeah, we still have Adventure Time for at least another year, don't we?